Today the fucking 16th or what? Today is the 16th, right? Anybody? Nobody's here. July 1st, June 19th. Let's see what we got over here. Oh man, what is this? Is from yesterday or today? Say it is the 16th. Let me see. Tis the 16th. All right. The Sorrows of Young Werther by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. Goethe. June 16th, 1771. Why do I not write to you, you who pretend to know so much? Ask such a question. You should be able to guess that. I am well, that is to say, in a word, I have made an acquaintance who has won my heart. I don't know. To give you a proper account of the manner in which I met the most enchanting of women will be a difficult task. I am happy and contented, and therefore not a very reliable reporter. An angel, nonsense. Everybody says that of the girl he loves, and yet I find it impossible to tell you how perfect she is, or why she is so perfect. Enough, she has completely captivated me. So much simplicity with so much intelligence, so kind and yet so resolute, a mind so calm and a life so active. But all this is wretched stuff and mere pale abstraction, which tells you not one single concrete thing about her. Some other time, no, not some other time, now, this very instant, I will tell you all, now or never. Well, between ourselves, since I began my letter, I have been 3 times on the point of putting down my pen, of saddling my horse and riding out there. I swore this morning that I would not, and yet I am rushing to the window every few moments to see how high the sun is. I could not help it. I had to go out to her. I have just come back. Wilhelm, I shall have my supper and will write to you. What a delight it was to see her in the midst of those dear, happy children, her 8 brothers and sisters. But if I go on like this, you will be no wiser at the end of my letter than you were at the beginning. Pay attention then, and I will force myself to give you the details. I wrote to you the other day that I had become acquainted with the district judge and that he had invited me to visit him soon at his hermitage, or rather in his little kingdom. But I neglected to do so, and perhaps might never have gone if chance had not discovered to me the treasure concealed in that retired spot. Some of our young people had arranged a ball in the country, at which I agreed to be present. I invited for the evening a pretty and agreeable but rather dull sort of girl from the neighborhood, and it was agreed that I should hire a carriage and take my partner and her cousin. On the way, we were to pick up Charlotte S. My companion told me as we drove along through the park to the hunting lodge that I should make the acquaintance of a very beautiful girl. Take care, added the cousin, that you do not lose your heart. What do you mean, said I, because she is already engaged to a very worthy man, she replied, who is gone to settle his affairs upon the death of his father and to apply for a lucrative position. This information did not interest me much. When we arrived at the gate, the sun was about to set behind the hills. The air was sultry, and the ladies expressed their fears of an approaching storm. As masses of grayish clouds were gathering on the horizon, I relieved their fears by pretending to be weatherwise, although I myself had a feeling that our party might be interrupted. I alighted, and a maid who came to the gate requested us to wait a moment. Mademoiselle Lottchen would be with us presently. I walked across the yard to the house, and when I had gone up a flight of steps in front and had opened the door, I saw before me the most charming scene I have ever witnessed. 6 children from 11 to 2 years old were running around about the hall and surrounding a lovely girl of medium height, dressed in a simple white frock with pink ribbons. She was holding a loaf of dark bread in her hand and was cutting slices for the little ones all round, in proportion to their age and appetite. She performed her task in a most graceful and affectionate manner, each awaiting his turn with outstretched hands and happily shouting his thanks. Some of them ran away at once to enjoy their supper, while others, of a gentler disposition, walked to the gate to see the strangers and to look at the carriage in which their Charlotte was to drive away. Forgive me for giving you the trouble to come for me, and for keeping the ladies waiting, but dressing and making arrangements for the house while I am away had made me forget my children's supper, and they do not like to take it from anyone but me. I paid her some indifferent compliment, but my whole soul was absorbed by her air, her voice, her manner, and I had scarcely recovered from my surprise when she ran into her room to fetch her gloves and fan. The young ones threw inquiring glances at me from a distance, and I approached the youngest, a delicious little creature. He drew back, and Charlotte, entering at the moment, said, "Louis, shake hands with your cousin." The little fellow obeyed willingly, and I could not resist giving him a hearty kiss, notwithstanding his dirty little face. "Cousin," I said to Charlotte as I offered her my hand, "do you think I deserve the happiness of being related to you?" She replied with a quick smile, "Oh, I have such a number of cousins that I should be sorry if you were the most undeserving of them." In taking leave, she impressed upon her next oldest sister, Sophie, a girl of about 11, to take good care of the children and to say goodbye to Papa for her when he came home from his ride. She enjoined the little ones to obey their sister Sophie as they would herself, and some did promise that they would. But a little fair haired girl, about 6 years old, said, "But Sophie is not you, Charlotte, and we like you best." The two eldest boys had climbed up behind the carriage at my request, and at my request, she permitted them to accompany us to the edge of the wood if they promised to sit still and hold fast. We were hardly seated, and the ladies had greeted one another, making the usual remarks upon each other's dress, especially their bonnets, and upon the company they expected to meet, when Charlotte stopped the carriage and made her brothers get down. They insisted upon kissing her hand once more, which the eldest did with all the delicacy of a youth of 15, but the other in a lighter and more impetuous manner. She asked them again to give her love to the children, and we drove off. The cousin inquired whether Charlotte had finished the book she had sent her the other day. "No," said Charlotte, "I do not like it. You can have it again. And the one before that was not much better." I was surprised, upon asking the title, at her reply. We feel obliged to suppress this passage in the letter so as not to offend anyone, although no author need pay much attention to the opinion of one simple girl or that of an unbalanced young man. I found much character in everything she said. Every word seemed to brighten her features with new charms, with new rays of intelligence, which appeared to increase gradually as she felt that I understood her. "When I was younger," she said, "I loved nothing so much as novels. Nothing could equal my delight when, on Sundays, I could settle down quietly in a corner and enter with my whole heart and soul into the joys or sorrows of some Miss Jenny. I do not deny that they possess some charms for me yet, but I read so seldom that I prefer books that suit my taste. And I like those authors best who describe my own situation in life, and the friends who are about me, whose stories touch me with interest because they resemble my own domestic life, which is, perhaps, not absolutely paradise, but on the whole a source of indescribable happiness." I tried to conceal the emotion which these words aroused, but it was of slight avail, for when she incidentally expressed her opinion of the vicar, or is that the vicar? The vicar of Wakefield, and of other works, I could no longer contain myself, but said, when I thought of it, and it was not until Charlotte had addressed herself to the other two ladies that I remembered their presence and observed them sitting silent and astonished. The cousin looked at me several times with a mocking air, which, however, I did not at all mind. We talked of the pleasures of dancing. If it is a fault to love it, said Charlotte, I confess that I prize it above all other amusements. If anything worries me, I go to my old squeaky piano, drum out a quadrille, and everything is well again. How I gazed into her rich dark eyes as she spoke, how my own eyes hung on her warm lips and fresh glowing cheeks, how I became lost in the delightful sound of what she said, so much so that I often did not hear her actual words. In short, when we arrived at the dance, I alighted from the carriage as if in a dream, and was so lost in the dim world around me that I scarcely heard the music which came from the brightly lit ballroom. I sub and like this is content. Thanks, bruv. Two gentlemen, Mr. Audran and a certain NN, I cannot be bothered with names, who were the cousins and Charlotte's partners, received us at the carriage door, and took charge of their ladies while I followed with mine. Where the hell was the? Oh, no, that ain't it. Oh, there it was up there. Through though the names of some of our native authors are omitted, whoever shares Charlotte's approbation will feel in his heart who they are if he should read this passage, and no one else needs to know. We danced the minuet. I engaged one lady after another, and it seemed to me that precisely the most disagreeable could not bring themselves to change partners and end the figure. Charlotte and her partner began an English quadrille, and you must imagine my delight when it was her turn to dance the figure with us. You should see Charlotte dance. She dances with her whole heart and soul. Her body is all harmony, elegance, and grace, as if nothing else mattered, as if she had no other thought or feeling, and doubtless for the moment everything else has ceased to exist for her. She was engaged for the second quadrille, but promised me the third, and assured me with the most disarming ingenuousness that she was very fond of the German way of dancing. It is the custom here, she said, for the previous partners to dance the German dance together. But my partner is an indifferent waltzer, and will feel delighted if I save him the trouble. Your partner cannot waltz and does not like it either, but I noticed during the quadrille, if you will waltz with me, do propose it to my partner, and I will ask yours. We agreed, and it was arranged that while we danced, our partners should entertain each other. We began, and at first delighted ourselves with the usual graceful motions of the arms. With what charm, what ease she moved. When the waltz started, and the dancers whirled round each other like planets in the sky, there was some confusion, since some of the dancers were fairly clumsy. We kept back, allowing the others to wear themselves out, and when the most awkward dancers had left the floor, we joined in and kept it up with one other couple, Audrin and his partner. Never had I danced more lightly. I felt myself more than mortal, holding this loveliest of creatures in my arms, flying with her like the wind till I lost sight of everything else. And Wilhelm, I vowed at that moment that a girl whom I loved, or for whom I felt the slightest attachment, should never waltz with another, even if it should be my end. You will understand. We took a few turns in the room to recover our breath. Then Charlotte sat down and ate some oranges that I had secured, the only ones left, but at every slice which she politely offered to a greedy lady sitting next to her, I felt as though a dagger went through my heart. We were the second couple in the third quadrille, as we were dancing along, and heaven knows with what ecstasy I gazed at her eyes, which shone with the sweetest feeling of enjoyment. We passed the lady whom I had noticed because of her charming expression, although she was no longer young. She looked at Charlotte with a smile, shook her finger at her, and repeated twice significantly the name Albert. Who is Albert? I asked Charlotte. If it is not impertinent, she was about to answer when we had to separate. In order to execute the figure of eight, and as we crossed in front of each other, I noticed that she looked somewhat pensive. Why should I conceal it from you? She said as she gave me her hand for the promenade. Albert is a worthy man to whom I am as good as engaged. Now there was nothing new to me in this. The girls had told me of it on the way. Yet it struck me as new since I had not thought of it in connection with her, whom in so short a time I had grown to like so much. At any rate, I became confused, got out of the figure, and caused general confusion, so that it took Charlotte's whole presence of mind to straighten me out by pulling and pushing me into my proper place. The dance was not yet finished when the lightning, which we had for some time seen on the horizon, and which I had pretended was only summer lightning, grew more violent, and the thunder was heard above the music. When any distress or terror interrupts our amusements, it naturally makes a deeper impression than at other times, partly because the contrast makes us more keenly susceptible, or rather, perhaps because our senses are then more open to impressions, and the shock is consequently stronger. To this cause I must ascribe the looks of fear on the faces of the ladies. I must One wisely sat down in a corner with her back to the window and held her hands over her ears. A second knelt down and hid her face in the other's lap. A third pushed herself between them and embraced her sisters with 1,000 tears. Some insisted on going home, others, unaware of what they were doing, lacked sufficient presence of mind to avoid the impertinence of their partners, who had something to drink and who sought to capture for themselves those sighs which the lips of our distressed beauties had intended for heaven. Some of the gentlemen had gone downstairs to smoke a quiet pipe, and the rest of the company gladly accepted a happy suggestion of the host to retire into another room which had shutters and curtains. We had hardly, pardon, curtains for the unenlightened. We had hardly got there when Charlotte arranged the chairs in a circle, and when the company had sat down at her request, she proposed a game. I noticed some of the guests purse their lips and stretch themselves at the prospect of some agreeable forfeit. Let us play at counting, said Charlotte. Now pay attention. I shall go round the circle from right to left, and each one is to count, one after the other, the number that comes to him. But he must count fast. Whoever hesitates or makes a mistake gets a box on the ear, and so on, till we have counted 1,000. It was delightful to see the fun. She went round the circle with upraised arms. One, said the first, two, the second, three, the third, and so on, till Charlotte went faster and faster. One man made a mistake, instantly a box on the ear, and amid the laughter that ensued, another box, and so on, faster and faster. I myself came in for two. I imagined that they were harder than the rest, but felt quite delighted. General laughter and commotion put an end to the game long before we had counted to 1,000. The party broke up into little separate groups. The storm was over, and I followed Charlotte into the ballroom. On the way, she said, the boxes on the ear made them forget their fears of the storm. I could make no reply. I, she continued, was as much frightened as any of them, but by pretending to be brave to keep up the spirits of the others, I forgot my own fears. We went to the window. It was still thundering in the distance. A soft rain was pouring down over the country and filled the air around us with delicious fragrance. Charlotte leaned on her elbows. Her eyes wandered over the scene. She looked up to the sky and then turned to me. Her eyes were filled with tears. She put her hand on mine and said, Klopstock. I remembered at once the magnificent ode of his, which was in her thoughts, and felt overcome by the flood of emotion which the mention of his name called forth. It was more than I could bear. I bent over her hand, kissed it in a stream of ecstatic tears, and again looked into her eyes. Divine Klopstock, If only you could have seen your apotheosis in those eyes, and your name, so often profaned, would that I never heard it repeated. And that's going to be the end of that entry for June 16th, 1770. Van. All right, that's all. You get nothing else.